Welcome to the new Porsche Macan, which is now fully electric and must have been a challenge for Porsche to put together. You've got to take a brand that is synonymous with driving dynamics, great handling, performance and loud engines, and make a kind of mid-size SUV go fully electric and still make it do all of those Porsche things. And I suppose to put what I'm trying to say into context, this car weighs 400 kilos more than an ICE version of a Macan. So you get the idea. That's 4 hefty rugby players in the back at all times. And interestingly, this car actually differs quite a lot in terms of the ICE version, because it's on Audi and Porsche's shared PPE platform, shared with the Audi Q6 e-tron, for example. And they've done clever things like put the motors slightly behind the rear axles to give a certain balance of weight like you'd get in a 911. So they have definitely thought about it. It's not just a case of let's slap a battery into the ICE version of a Macan and away you go. So the Macan has twin valve dampers if you go for the air suspension version of it, and I would urge you to do so because it's just so good, and you can have so many options on how you want this car to perform. The steering is weighted, but it just works beautifully with the sharpness of the steering. It doesn't turn in like a large, tall-ish SUV should. The brakes are brilliant. They don't feel like you're driving an EV. So it's not really a one-pedal driving situation, but actually when you press the brakes, it stops like a normal car should. There's no gap between regen and friction. It just stops. They're amazing. It's probably the best EV I've driven when it comes to braking. There's also quite a few different variants of this car. So you got the standard car, which starts at €92,000, which is a lot of money, but actually in Ireland for a brand new Porsche, it's actually not bad. It goes right up to the turbo, and there's an S version in between. There's all-wheel drive versions, and this papaya orange colour is a very, very standout colour. There's no two ways about it. And some of the vehicles will have 20-inch alloys, which look great, but might not be the best for range. On that range front, well, it has a over 100 kilowatt hour gross battery, which some slightly different chemistry involved compared to even the Taycan, and how the pouches are set up in the Taycan compared to how the cells work in this car. It has 800 volt architecture, so it's good for about 270 kilowatt charging speed. Not quite as fast as the revised Taycan, but you'll still get a fairly hefty range jump into this car in about 21 minutes. What is also cool is you get a decent usable frunk in the car. I love how it opens with your Porsche key. You just pop the button on it and the struts and electric opening bring this to life. Even the badge is slightly different apparently compared to the ICE version of the car. What I'm not sure about is the front. It's not the headlights as such of an issue with, or even these huge big fog light and headlight unit split thing, and there's daytime running lights there. That's all fine. It's this big plastic lump on the front of the car and the lower splitter. Now, if I'm spending nearly 100 grand on a Porsche, I don't think I'd want so much plastic on the front of it. From a cynical point of view, yes, it is another SUV that has an EV battery and can weigh over, well over 2 ton. But particularly in this version, which has some rear wheel steering and adjustable air suspension, it actually manages to cope with all the weight and keep an element of Porsche driving dynamics intact in such a heavy vehicle. There's a couple of roof rails over the back if you want to go on holidays, and you get a retractable spoiler which will alert to the attention of the Gardaí that you've perhaps been going too fast. But that's not necessarily the case, because you can turn that on at any speed. You can use your fancy key to pop the boot, or you can just press this button, and you would be forgiven for expecting a slightly bigger boot in this car. Now, it's great that you have the frunk and everything, and you can put your cables in there, and there is a little bit of extra space underneath the floor, so that's positive. A couple of nets. It's just not very deep at all, and that's not very flexible at all. So if you're planning on putting buggies and stuff into this thing, I think you might want a Cayenne. In the back of the Macan, it's pretty alright. There's almost a fully flat floor. You get your own climate control, air vents down here little shelf to keep things intact. If you're not using the middle seat, you have a nice wide armrest. The seats are very, very comfortable. The seats on the front and driver's side, yes, these shoulders are quite tall. They do restrict a bit of the view, and there's ever so small nets on the bottom of the seats. But the glass roof floods in light, makes it feel quite spacious, and all the things that your hands and fingers touch feel really, really good. So the interior in the back is very decent. Not a huge amount of pitch and roll in it, so by that I mean when you do brake or accelerate, the car isn't necessarily lifting like this and going up and down and giving you that seasick feeling. It's all very composed. Now it is firm if you have it on the Sport Plus particular setting with the chassis. You can put it into off-road mode, you can drive it in normal mode, and you can actually get some off-road bits in a pack on this car to give you a bit more clearance and stuff like that. Why would you want to do that with a Porsche? They're not for off-road. Why would you want to bring them off-road? Big fan of the Macan up front. Everything is black and dark. If you want to go for some brighter tones, that might be a nice thing to do if budget allows. Wireless pad for your device down here. The lovely wraparound curved screens and a pretty decent screen complete with a camera. Also here you can set up all your charging things. You have the sports chronograph in the top of the dash. Again, a nod to some of the other more performance orientated vehicles. But that's really not to say that you can't have fun in the new Macan, particularly if you go for the higher output versions. But still, at over 400 brake horsepower, this has got a lot. Down here, good use of extra space without a transmission tunnel. Nice illuminated ambient lighting strips dotted all over the cabin. 2 good spots for your drinks holders. Armrest, complete with a drying towel inside. I'm not sure that's meant to be there. But anyway, this is quite easy to use. You can lower and higher your suspension at a quick touch, as well as messing with your ADAS systems. You can turn it into sports mode or sports plus. You can turn on or off an electronic sports sound. You can extend your spoiler, and all the chassis and everything can be operated from here. So very premium feeling product. Nice leather. If I use my own Porsche 911 as a comparison tool, have they skimped on the quality of the interior in almost 20 years? I don't necessarily believe so. This extended leather and everything feels really, really good. Drive modes are selected on the steering wheel. Again, we would have seen that in the Taycan and other more recent versions of models from Porsche. And yeah, it just feels nice. I love the blind spot that's integrated into the door here that will flash red. Somebody on a horse, for example, comes up on your inside. So yes, quite dark. And if you want to brighten up the interior, it's probably worth considering. I think the air suspension, for example, is absolutely essential. It transforms the car. So think about it. Just again, for the weight of the car, though, you're probably not expecting it to grip as well as it does. Now, I'm on a totally sheltered 2 degrees. I can see the ice staring back at me through the windscreen. And in historic times with a rear-wheel drive Porsche, you'd be taking it very handy on a road like this. But actually, you floor this thing and yeah, there's just no issue in terms of grip. Now, on full lock, using the 400 brake horsepower, I can get the back to step out a little bit on that icy stretch of road, which would give me the impression that if you want to have fun in the Macan, even with the all-wheel drive, you can. But you're going to have to provoke it. It won't probably do it by itself, which is not what I can say the same for a 911 with just power going to the rear wheels. Trust me on that one. I have read that the versions with just the standard suspension setup can be a little bit firm and a little bit unsettled. You know you're on larger alloys, but it's not uncomfortable unless you put it into sport mode, and then yeah, everything is a lot springier, but that's what you're asking the car to do. Over the 2,500 kilometers that this Macan has done, it's added about 24 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. I think that's quite acceptable for a car with 400 brake horsepower. On the shorter run, it's at about 27.3 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. By that I mean the last 20 kilometers of driving, which is just me, hands up. But it's no worse than the Q6 e-tron, which I have driven. Perhaps actually a little bit better. The seats are very comfortable, by the way. It's a vehicle I would be happy enough doing decent mileage in, because I think it would be a nice comfort place to be. All the power when you need it. As I mentioned, the brakes are just brilliant. Well done, Porsche. So a great all-rounder. And maybe for the first time you'll be able to consider something with the famous badge on the front. That could be your family car. It's not cheap, it's a luxurious purchase, but you know, life is short. And as someone once told me, life is short, buy the Porsche. And I did, and I don't regret it. I love it. It doesn't have cheap running costs, unlike this thing. And yeah, if you've always fancied one, it's a pretty good effort. When you think about the performance, the charging, the reasonable space for the family, albeit a pretty small boot, but you get Frunk, and the fact that you get a Porsche badge on your car. This car, it has to be said, is not totally standard. The 92,000 euro version won't have an air suspension, for example. But if you're looking in the space of BMW X5s and Audi, they've done some clever things. They've lowered the center of gravity. They've moved some of the parts of the mechanics of the battery and stuff into the center of the vehicle, between the rear seat and lower down, to give it a better center of gravity, to create more space. So it's a clever proposition in terms of what it is. And it's made Porsche appear in a space that perhaps they wouldn't have appeared before. Instead of an X5, which is a bigger car, if the badge is more important to you, then you can now be considering the new Macan. So in this particular spec, decent performance, nice handling. Yes, it does feel a little bit heavy at times, but it's not that long ago that you just wouldn't get near a new one of these for this kind of money. So if you're interested in a bit of flash in your mid-size SUV, I'd have a look around. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.